Welcome to Plan B. Plan B is what to do if exams get cancelled in 2022. Nice rhyme, Mr. Salles. Now, first I should say that I think there's a 99-point-something% chance that exams will go ahead. Now, that's both good news and bad news, because Plan B isn't what happens when we cancel exams, it's what happens tomorrow in your school in case we cancel exams. So the good news is that your schools are now going to have to carry out an assessment for every subject every term. So you will then do an assessment, and if the exams get cancelled, you'll have all these termly assessments to use as your exam grade. Well, that is also the bad news, because whereas normally you do your revision to peak in May and June, now schools are under pressure to assess you all the time. And this will mean you won't have time to prepare as well. It will also mean that you're under more pressure because potentially every assessment could count towards your grade. Now, the government is worried about the effect of this on your mental health, so they've instructed schools that the assessments shouldn't happen too often, and that the overall number of assessments you do shouldn't exceed what you'd get in the exam. So if you're sitting a 1 hour 45-minute exam paper in May or June, the assessments that you do in school shouldn't go over 1 hour and 40 minutes for that paper. So that's to protect you. A second aspect to protect you is that teachers have to tell you if this is going to be used to arrive at a grade. So they have to say this will be a tag, a teacher assessed grade, in the event that exams are cancelled. The third way that the government is trying to reduce the pressure on your mental health is they've asked teachers not to take you into the exam hall. They haven't forbidden it, but what they're saying to schools is this doesn't have to feel like a really high pressure situation. You can do it in the classroom as long as students complete the work in silence as they would in an exam. The other bit of good news is that schools are not going to test you on stuff you don't know. So Ofqual have asked teachers to make sure that these assessments are only on what you've been taught. So if there was a subject you weren't taught because of school closures, or you're not going to be taught yet until March or February or what have you, your schools aren't going to test you now on that content. They'll only test you on what you have already studied in school. Ofqual really don't want you to have an educational experience where you're constantly doing assessments, so they've told schools you're not allowed to redo one. You can get excellent feedback which will help you for the next assessment, but you can't get feedback on one and then redo it. Now, there is a way to make this system work to your advantage, because doing tests is the best way for you to revise. Now, let's remember, it's most likely you're actually going to sit an exam and these assessments you do in school won't count. But those assessments are brilliant at building memory and exam skills. Two fantastic things you'll need when the exams actually happen. So every assessment you do in school is not a moment of insane pressure. Oh my God, this is going to be my grade. It's probably not going to be your grade. It's going to boost your grade insanely because each one is a fantastic bit of revision. But there's more. These assessments will be done on past papers. Where else are teachers going to get the questions? So you should be using past paper questions in your revision, because the chances of one of those coming up in an assessment that your teachers give you are pretty high. Remember, you've got 10 subjects with 6 assessments each, probably. That's 60 assessments. What's the odds on nailing 10 of those by having done them at home? Really, really high. There's probably a high probability of you getting about 20 of those if you do all your revision from past paper questions. Okay, Let's imagine exams do by some miracle get cancelled. Ofqual then has to allow students to appeal against their result, and they've got to find a way for schools to agree on marks so that different schools don't have completely different ways of arriving at those marks. And Ofqual have said, do you know what, we're not going to bother with that. And I think the reason they're not going to bother with that yet is because they don't really believe exams will be cancelled. They'll only think about that if exams are cancelled, which is a top tip that the government is pretty desperate to keep exams going. Which means you should treat these assessments not as the be-all and end-all, because they probably won't be. You should treat them as this wonderful opportunity to get fantastic revision, to get much higher grades. In fact, my prediction is that your Year 11 will get much higher knowledge than students in previous years, even during normal exams, because you will be doing more exam-like questions and learning at a much quicker rate than someone who left school 3 or 4 years ago. And you will obviously know a lot more than anyone who left school in the last 2 years, which were disrupted by COVID. So the good news, I think, is that you are going to leave better educated and more intelligent than the people who have gone before you. And that can only be fantastic when you get onto A-levels, when you get onto university if you go there, because you will be a better learner who knows more than the people who have gone on before. Another rhyming couplet. Isn't a world a lovely place? If you want to find out the answer to that question, watch this video here. See you soon on my channel.